The massive space station appeared in the viewport like a metal city floating among the stars. Nexus Station was the biggest thing Ambassador Kang Woo-jin had ever seen. It was home to the Galactic Council and millions of alien beings from across the galaxy. The station spun slowly, creating artificial gravity for its inhabitants. Lights twinkled across its surface like tiny stars. Woo-jin stood at the window of the human transport ship Harmony. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been a diplomat for 30 years. He had seen many worlds and met many different species, but this was his first time at Nexus Station. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Captain Park Yeon-ho said as he joined Woo-jin at the window. Yeon-ho was younger, maybe 40 years old, with the build of a soldier. He commanded the ship's security team. "Yes," Woo-jin replied, "and intimidating. They built this to impress visitors, to show their power." The station was indeed impressive. It was 50 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide, home to over 100 different alien species. The Galactic Council had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They considered themselves the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Humans were newcomers. They had only developed faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. To most aliens, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. Useful sometimes, but not really important. "Sir, we're getting clearance to dock," said Lieutenant Kim So-ra from the communications station. She was a young woman with short, black hair and sharp eyes. "They're directing us to docking bay 47. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Woo-jin said. He straightened his formal diplomatic robes. They were simple but elegant, dark blue with silver trim. He carried no weapons and wore no armor. Diplomats relied on words, not violence. The docking process took 30 minutes. The station's traffic control guided them through a maze of other ships. Woo-jin saw vessels from dozens of different worlds. Some looked like metal birds. Others were perfectly round spheres. A few were so strange he couldn't figure out which end was the front. Once they docked, Woo-jin gathered his small team. Besides Captain Yeon-ho, he had brought 3 other security officers and 2 junior diplomats. The aliens had been very clear about the rules. Only the ambassador could enter the council chambers. Everyone else had to stay on the ship. "I don't like this," Yeon-ho said quietly. "You'll be alone in there with them." "That's how it works," Woo-jin replied. "The council has these rules for a reason. They want to avoid any appearance of military pressure during negotiations." "But what if something goes wrong?" Woo-jin smiled. It was a patient, understanding smile. "Nothing will go wrong, Captain. These are civilized beings. We're here to discuss trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Simple business." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a long corridor with walls made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft light. The air smelled different. Here. Cleaner somehow, but with strange undertones that reminded Woo-jin of flowers he didn't recognize. A small group of aliens waited to greet him. The leader was a tall, thin being with blue skin and 4 arms. Each arm ended in delicate fingers that looked almost like flower petals. When it spoke, its voice was musical. "Welcome to Nexus Station, Ambassador Kang Woo-jin," the alien said. "I am Guide Meltara. I will escort you to the council chambers." "Thank you," Woo-jin replied with a polite bow. "I am honored to be here." As they walked through the station, Woo-jin observed everything carefully. The corridors were wide enough for large groups to pass. The walls showed moving pictures of different worlds. Some showed peaceful cities under alien suns. Others displayed spectacular natural wonders. They passed many different aliens. Some looked almost human, just with different colored skin or extra limbs. Others were so strange that Wu Jin had to work hard not to stare. There was a being that looked like a walking tree with glowing fruits hanging from its branches. Another looked like a giant butterfly made of living metal. Most of the aliens they passed barely glanced at Wu Jin. A few stared with curiosity. He heard whispered conversations in languages he didn't understand, but his translation device picked up a few words. Human, primitive, young species. Your people are quite young, Guide Meltara said as they walked. Only 50 years since first contact. Most species take centuries to develop proper space travel. We learn quickly, Wu Jin replied diplomatically. Yes, we have noticed. Your industrial capacity is impressive for such a new species. That is why the Council is interested in trade relationships. They entered a transport pod that moved through tubes inside the station. Through transparent walls, Wu Jin could see the vastness of space outside. Other ships moved like distant fireflies against the darkness. Tell me about the council members I'll be meeting, Wu Jin said. There are 12 permanent members, Meltara explained. Each represents one of the founding civilizations of the Galactic Council. They have the most influence. There are also 37 associate members who represent newer civilizations. And humans? Humans have observer status. You may speak when invited, but you cannot vote on council decisions. This was what Wu Jin expected. Humans were still proving themselves in galactic politics. Observer status was actually better than most new species received. The council chambers were enormous. The ceiling stretched high above, decorated with holographic displays showing real-time images from across the galaxy. Seats were arranged in a large circle, with each species section designed for their particular physical needs. The human section was small, just 3 seats near the back. It was clearly an afterthought, added when humans first gained observer status. Wu Jin took his place and activated his personal translation system. Around him, aliens of various shapes and sizes filled their seats. The diversity was amazing. Some breathed different atmospheres and wore environmental suits. Others seemed comfortable in the standard air mixture. At the center of the circle sat the council speaker, a massive being that looked like a cross between an elephant and an octopus. Its trunk-like appendages manipulated holographic controls, as it called the session to order. We welcome our observers and members to this standard session, the speaker announced. Its voice was deep and resonant. Today we will discuss trade route regulations, territorial boundary disputes, and resource allocation in the Outer Rim territories. Wu Jin listened carefully as various species presented their concerns. Most of the discussion was routine. Trade, disputes over shipping lanes, arguments about mining rights in asteroid fields, the kind of mundane business that kept a galactic civilization running. But he noticed something troubling. Several times when human territories or interests were mentioned, certain council members exchanged meaningful looks. There was something happening beneath the surface of these polite discussions. Councillor Vextar of the Hegemony was particularly interesting to watch. The Hegemony controlled a large section of space near human territory. Vextar looked like a giant insect with multiple eyes and sharp blade-like arms. Every time humans were mentioned, those eyes focused on Wu Jin with obvious hostility. Another concerning figure was Councillor Threshka. This being was reptilian, with scales that changed color based on mood. Right now, those scales showed dark, patterns that Wu Jin's briefings had identified as aggression or anger. The session proceeded normally for 2 hours. Wu Jin spoke only when directly asked questions about human trade capacity or territorial claims. He kept his responses brief and factual, but he could feel tension building in the chamber. Something was about to happen. He had been a diplomat, long enough to recognize the signs. The aliens were working up to something. They had invited him here for a reason beyond simple trade negotiations. Wu Jin kept his expression calm and friendly, but inside he was preparing himself for whatever was coming. He had one advantage the aliens didn't know about. Humans might be newcomers to galactic politics, but they had been dealing with conflict and diplomacy for thousands of years on their own world. These aliens were about to learn something important about human nature, but Wu Jin hoped it wouldn't come to that. He hoped this would remain a simple, peaceful discussion between civilized beings. The session continued, and Wu Jin waited to see what the Galactic Council really wanted from humanity. The session had been going on for 3 hours when Councillor Vextar stood up. The insect-like being's multiple eyes focused on Ambassador Wu Jin. Around the chamber, other council members shifted in their seats. The air seemed to grow heavy. "With tension, I wish to raise a matter of galactic security," Vextar announced. Its voice had a clicking quality that made Wu Jin's translation device work harder to convert the meaning. The rapid expansion of human settlements concerns the hegemony. Wu Jin remained calm. He had expected this topic to come up eventually. Human colonies had been growing quickly in the past 20 years. They had claimed several star systems in what was considered neutral space. The hegemony recognizes human territorial claims under current galactic law, the council speaker said carefully. "What specific concerns do you wish to address?" Vextar's blade-like arms gestured toward a holographic display that appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of local space, with human territories marked in blue and hegemony space in red. "Look at this pattern," Vextar said. "Human colonies form a line between hegemony space and the rich mining systems in Sector 7. They claim to be peaceful settlers, but their placement is clearly strategic." Wu Jin studied the display. The alien had a point. Human colonies did form what could be seen as a barrier, but the truth was simpler than Vextar suggested. "May I respond?" Wu Jin asked politely. The council speaker gestured permission. "The human observer may speak." Wu Jin stood up slowly. He kept his voice calm and respectful. "Honored councilors, human expansion follows natural patterns. We settle worlds that can support our biology. We are not blocking access to Sector R7. The hegemony has never expressed interest in that region before." "Not interested?" Vextar's scales rippled with agitation. "Those systems contain rare metals essential for advanced technology. Your people establish colonies and then claim exclusive mining rights." "We follow galactic law," Wu Jin replied. "Any species may claim uninhabited worlds. The hegemony could have claimed those systems centuries ago." Councillor Threshka suddenly spoke up. The reptilian being's scales had turned a dark red color. "The problem is not what humans have done. The problem is what they will do." More aliens began to pay attention. Threshka represented the Dominion, another powerful faction in the council. When both the hegemony and Dominion agreed on something, other species usually listened. "Explain your concern," the council speaker said. Threshka's long neck swayed as it spoke. Humans reproduce faster than most species. They adapt to new environments quickly. They build industries on worlds others consider useless. In 50 years, they have gone from one world to 57 colonies. That is impressive growth, admitted Counselor Whelan of the Trade Federation. The blue-skinned alien looked thoughtful, perhaps too impressive. Wu Jin felt the mood in the chamber shifting. What had started as a routine challenge was becoming something more serious. He had to be careful with his words. Human growth is driven by necessity, he said. Our homeworld became crowded. We needed new places to live. We chose worlds that others did not want. Worlds with heavy gravity or harsh weather. We made them livable through hard work. And now you control strategic positions throughout the sector, Vextar said accusingly. Your merchant ships carry goods between all major trade routes. Your colonies provide stopping points for long-distance travel. You are becoming too influential for such a young species. This was the real issue, Wu Jin realized. The aliens were not concerned about territory or resources. They were worried about human influence growing too fast. They wanted to slow down human expansion before it became a threat to their own power. What do you propose? Wu Jin asked carefully. Threshka's scales brightened to an aggressive orange. Limits on future human expansion. No new colonies within 50 light-years of existing council member territories. Shared mining rights for all rare resource systems. The chamber fell quiet. Other council members watched to see how Wu Jin would respond. This was more than a suggestion. It was a demand backed by two of the most powerful factions in the council. Wu Jin smiled. It was a small, patient smile. The kind of expression he had learned to use when dealing with unreasonable demands. To the aliens, it probably looked like acceptance or submission. They did not understand what that smile really meant. These proposals would significantly limit human growth, Wu Jin said calmly. They would also violate the territorial expansion, rights guaranteed to all council-recognized species. Laws can be changed, Vexatar said coldly, especially when galactic security is at stake. I see. Wu Jin's smile never wavered. And if humans refuse to accept these limitations? Then, the Council would be forced to take stronger measures, Threshka said. Its scales had turned an even deeper shade of red. Economic sanctions, trade restrictions, isolation from galactic commerce. The threat was clear. Accept the limitations, or face the combined economic power of the Galactic Council. For most species, this would be devastating. Cut off from galactic trade, a civilization could stagnate and decline within decades. But humans were not like most species. I will need to consult with my government, Wu Jin said diplomatically. These are significant proposals that require careful consideration. Of course, the council speaker said. We understand the human decision-making process requires consultation with your homeworld. How long do you need? 1 standard week should be sufficient, Wu Jin replied. Vextar's multiple eyes glittered with satisfaction. Excellent. We look forward to a reasonable response from the human government. The session continued with other business, but Wu Jin barely listened. His mind was working through the implications of what had just happened. The aliens thought they had backed humans into a corner. They believed economic threats would force compliance. They were wrong about human nature in several important ways. First, they assumed humans would act like other species that had faced similar ultimatums. Most aliens would negotiate for better terms or reluctantly accept the limitations. Humans had a different approach to unreasonable demands. Second, they underestimated human independence. Unlike many species that had developed within the galactic community, humans had built their civilization in isolation. They were used to relying on themselves. Third, they failed to understand human unity. When threatened, humans did not fragment or seek individual safety. They came together. They stood as one people, regardless of which planet they lived on or what government they served. The session finally ended after 6 hours. As aliens filed out of the chamber, several approached. Wu Jin with various comments. Some offered sympathy for his difficult position. Others suggested that accepting the limitations would be wise for a young species. Counselor Wei-Lan of the Trade Federation was more direct. Ambassador, I hope your people will consider the benefits of cooperation. The Council offers friendship and prosperity to those who work within the system. And to those who do not? Wu Jin asked politely. Wei-Lan's expression became serious. The galaxy is a large and sometimes dangerous place. It is better to have friends than enemies. After the chamber emptied, Wu Jin remained in his seat for several minutes. He appeared to be reviewing his notes, but he was actually composing a message in his mind, not the diplomatic report his government would expect, but something much more important. Guide Meltara eventually approached. Ambassador, I can escort you back to your ship now. Thank you, Wu Jin said, standing up. That would be helpful. As they walked through the corridors of Nexus Station, Wu Jin maintained casual conversation with his guide, but his thoughts were focused on the message he needed to send. Not just to Earth's government, but to every human colony, every human ship, every human outpost in known space. The Galactic Council had just made a serious mistake. They had threatened humanity as a whole, thinking they were negotiating with just another minor species. They had no idea that humans considered any attack on one to be an attack on all. Back at the docking bay, Captain Yeon-ho was waiting with obvious concern. How did it go, sir? Wu Jin's smile broadened slightly. Interesting, Captain. Very interesting. I need to send some messages. To Earth? To Earth, and to every human world in the galaxy. As they walked toward the ship, Wu Jin felt a strange sense of anticipation. The aliens thought they had given him an ultimatum. Instead, they had given him something much more valuable. They had given him a reason to show them what humanity was really capable of when threatened. The next week was going to be very educational for the Galactic Council. 3 days had passed since the initial session. Ambassador Wu Jin had spent the time in diplomatic meetings with individual council members. Some were genuinely interested in finding a peaceful solution. Others clearly supported the hegemony and dominion position. But all of them seemed to believe humans would eventually accept the proposed limitations. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The emergency council session was called for the 4th day. Wu Jin had requested the meeting to deliver humanity's official response. He entered the chamber with the same calm demeanor he had shown all week. His diplomatic robes were perfectly arranged. His expression was pleasant and professional. The chamber was more crowded than usual. Word had spread that the humans would give their answer today. Many council members who usually skipped routine sessions had come to witness what they expected would be human submission to galactic authority. Counselor Vexitar was in his usual seat, multiple eyes focused intently on Wu Jin. Threshka's scales showed a satisfied purple color that indicated confidence and anticipation. Other council members whispered among themselves as Wu Jin took his place in the small human section. The council speaker called the session to order. We have gathered today to hear the human government's response to the proposals made 3 days ago. Ambassador Kang Wu-jin, you may present your people's decision." Wu-jin stood slowly and activated his personal translation system. The chamber fell completely silent. Dozens of alien eyes focused on him with intense interest. "Honored counselors," he began in his usual calm voice, "I have consulted extensively with my government regarding the proposals for limiting human expansion and sharing resource rights." He paused and looked around the chamber. His expression remained pleasant, but there was something different in his eyes. A quiet confidence that had not been there before. "The human government has carefully considered all aspects of these proposals," he continued. "We have evaluated the potential benefits of cooperation and the consequences of refusal." Vextar leaned forward slightly. Several other council members shifted in their seats with anticipation. "Our answer is no." The simple statement hung in the air like an explosive device. For several seconds, no one moved. The aliens had clearly expected negotiation, counter-proposals, or reluctant acceptance. They had not prepared for outright refusal. Threshka was the first to react. The reptilian being's scales flashed from purple to angry red. "No? You refuse the Council's generous offer of cooperation?" "We refuse demands that violate our fundamental rights as a spacefaring species," Wu-jin replied calmly. "Humans will continue to expand and develop according to our needs and abilities. We will not accept artificial limitations imposed by threats." Vexitar's blade-like arms clicked together in agitation. "You are making a serious error, human. The Council offers friendship and prosperity. Why do you choose isolation and economic hardship?" Wu-jin's smile widened slightly. It was still polite, still diplomatic, but there was something beneath it that should have warned the aliens. Something that spoke of deep confidence and hidden knowledge. "Because, Counselor Vextar, you have misunderstood something fundamental about human nature. You believe threats will make us compliant. You believe we will sacrifice our future for the promise of continued trade." "And you will not?" Threshka demanded. "No, we will not." The chamber erupted in angry chatter. Aliens spoke in dozens of languages, their translation devices creating a confusing babble of overlapping voices. The council speaker raised several tentacles for silence. "Ambassador," the speaker said when quiet returned, "surely you understand the consequences of this position. Economic isolation would devastate human colonies. Your people would suffer greatly." "Our people have suffered before," Wu-jin replied simply. "We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. We will survive economic pressure from the Galactic Council." This was not going as the aliens had planned. They had expected fear, negotiation, desperate attempts to find compromise. Instead, they faced calm defiance from a species they considered primitive and weak. Vextar stood up abruptly. The insect-like being towered over most others in the chamber. "You speak bravely for someone whose species controls only 57 worlds. The hegemony controls over 2,000 systems. The Dominion controls even more. What can humans do against such power?" Wu-jin looked up at the towering alien without any sign of intimidation. "More than you might expect, Counselor." "Empty." "Words!" Threshka snarled. The reptilian's scales had turned almost black with rage. "Your species is 50 years old. 50 years. Children playing with technologies they barely understand." "Children can be very dangerous when threatened," Wu-jin said softly. Something in his tone should have warned them, but the aliens were too focused on their anger and frustration to recognize the subtle threat. They had convinced themselves that humans were weak because they were young. They could not imagine that a species could develop dangerous capabilities. So quickly, Threshka slithered down from its elevated position and moved toward Wu Jin. The reptilian was twice the human's height and probably 5 times his weight. Its scales rippled with aggressive patterns as it loomed over the seated diplomat. "You think you can defy the combined power of the Galactic Council?" Threshka hissed. "You think your pathetic little colonies can survive without our trade and protection?" Wu Jin remained seated. He looked up at the angry alien with that same patient smile. "I think you are about to make a mistake that you will regret for the rest of your civilization's existence." "Mistake?" Threshka's voice rose to an angry shriek. "The only mistake here is allowing primitives like you to speak in this chamber." The reptilian's clawed hand swept down and struck Wu Jin across the face. The blow was powerful enough to knock the human from his chair. He fell to the floor with blood running from 3 deep scratches on his left cheek. The chamber fell silent. Again, but this time, the silence was different. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Wu Jin slowly pushed himself to his feet. He touched the wounds on his face and looked at the blood on his fingers. Around the chamber, aliens watched, with various expressions of shock, satisfaction, or concern. Then Wu Jin smiled. It was the same patient diplomatic smile he had worn all week, but now it had blood on it. "Thank you, Counselor Threshka," he said quietly. "You have just made my job much easier." "Your job?" Vextar demanded. "What job?" "Explaining to my people why we need to remind the galaxy that humans are not as helpless as we appear." Threshka snorted with contempt. "You threaten us? You? A single human on a station controlled by the Council?" Wu Jin dabbed at the blood on his face with a cloth. "I am not threatening anyone, Counselor. I am simply informing you that you have spilled human blood in an act of unprovoked aggression. My genetic signature is now evidence of an assault on a diplomatic representative." "So what?" Threshka snarled. "File a complaint with the diplomatic corps. Demand an apology. Protest to your government. Do whatever your weak species does when faced with superior force." Wu Jin's smile grew broader. "You really don't understand us at all, do you?" He reached into his diplomatic robes and withdrew a small communication device. It was no bigger than his palm, but when he activated it, every human sensor system in the galaxy would detect the signal. "Red Sky Protocol," he said into the device. "Authorization code Omega 77. Human blood has been spilled in an act of aggression by Counselor Threshka of the Dominion. All units respond." The message was simple. 3 words, an authorization code, and a brief explanation. But those words would change everything. Throughout human space, communication arrays began to relay the signal. Every human ship, every human colony, every human outpost would receive the message within hours, and then they would begin to move. Threshka looked confused. "What is Red Sky Protocol?" Wu Jin touched the blood on his face again and showed it to the chamber. "It means that one of ours has been harmed. It means the time for talking is over." "You think we fear your protests?" Vextar clicked dismissively. "You should fear what comes next," Wu Jin said softly, "because you have just learned the most important thing about humanity. We are not 57 separate colonies. We are not citizens of different worlds. We are one people spread across the stars. And when you hurt one of us, you hurt all of us." The aliens in the chamber looked at each other uncertainly. They had expected anger, protests, or demands for justice. They had not expected this calm certainty from a bleeding diplomat who acted as if he had just won some kind of victory. "Guards, escort the human back to his ship," the council speaker ordered. "This session is concluded." As Wu Jin was led from the chamber, he continued to smile. The blood on his face had already begun to clot, but it served as a reminder of what had just happened. Threshka had made the worst mistake in galactic history. The aliens had no idea what was coming, but they would learn soon enough that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to let any attack on their people go unanswered. Captain Park Yon-ho was in the ship's small command center when the emergency signal came through. He had been reviewing supply inventories, trying to stay busy, while waiting for Ambassador Wu Jin to return from the council session. The diplomatic meetings had been tense all week, and Yon-ho had a bad feeling about today's emergency session. The communication console chirped with an incoming priority message. Lieutenant Kim Sora looked up from her station with surprise. "Captain, we're receiving a red sky transmission," she said, her voice tight with tension. Yon-ho felt his blood turn cold. Red Sky Protocol was the most serious emergency code in human space. It meant a human diplomat had been attacked or killed. It meant the time for peaceful solutions was over. "Put it through," he ordered. Wu Jin's voice came through the speakers clearly. "Red Sky Protocol, authorization code Omega 77. Human blood has been spilled in an act of aggression by Counselor Threshka of the Dominion. All units respond." Thub. Command center fell silent. Yon-ho stared at the communication console as if it might explode. Sora turned pale. The other crew members looked shocked. "Sir," Sora said quietly, "what are your orders?" Yon-ho was already moving toward his personal console. His fingers flew over the controls as he composed a message to Admiral Kim Soo-bin at Human Fleet Command. The message was short and direct. "Red Sky confirmed. Ambassador attacked by alien council member, requesting immediate instructions." The IB reply came back within minutes. Admiral Soo-bin's face appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the kind of expression that had made her one of the most respected officers in human space. "Captain Park, confirm the Red Sky signal," she said without preamble. "Confirmed, Admiral. Ambassador Kang Woo-jin transmitted the code personally. He stated that Counselor Threshka of the Dominion spilled human blood in an act of aggression." Soo-bin's expression darkened. "Understood. You are to maintain your position at Nexus Station. Protect the ambassador at all costs. Do not take any aggressive action unless directly threatened." "Yes, Admiral. What about the protocol response?" "Leave that to us, Captain. Just keep our people safe." The transmission ended, but Yon-ho knew what was happening across human space. Red Sky Protocol had only been activated twice before in human history. Once when a human colony ship was destroyed by pirates. Once when a human trade delegation was massacred on a frontier world. Both times, the response had been swift and devastating. Lieutenant Sora was monitoring the communication networks. "Captain, I'm picking up increased military traffic from Earth and the core worlds. Fleet Command is issuing mobilization orders." "How extensive?" "Sir, it looks like everything. Every fleet, every reserve unit, every colonial defense force, they're all being activated." Yon-ho felt a mixture of pride and worry. Humanity was responding exactly as they should. When one human was attacked, all humans responded. But the scale of the mobilization was unprecedented. "Keep monitoring," he ordered. "I want to know the moment the ambassador returns to the ship." Across human space, the reaction was immediate and coordinated. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Lee Dae-ho received the Red Sky transmission while reviewing training reports at Navy headquarters. Within minutes, he was issuing orders to every human military unit in known space. The First Fleet, humanity's most powerful naval formation, began immediate preparations for deployment. Admiral Shin Tae-min's flagship, the Indomitable, was still in orbit around Mars when the orders arrived. Tae-min had been planning to retire next year. Instead, he found himself preparing for what might be the largest military operation in human history. On the colony world of New Seoul, Admiral Cho Mi-young was inspecting the orbital shipyards when her communication officer burst into the facility with a priority message. Mi-young read the Red Sky alert and immediately began issuing orders to her carrier group. The response was not limited to military units. On trading stations throughout human space, merchant captains received the signal and began altering their routes. Civilian transport ships started moving toward designated rally points. Even small survey vessels and mining ships responded to the call. Commander Lee Dae-ho was leading a scientific expedition near the Galactic Rim when the Red Sky signal reached his ship. He immediately abandoned the research mission and set course for the nearest military staging area. His small fleet of exploration vessels would not be much use in a fight, but they carried sensors and communication equipment that could be valuable. The response followed patterns that had been drilled into every human crew for decades. Red Sky Protocol was not just a call for military response. It was a call for all of humanity to unite against a common threat. On the agricultural world of New Busan, farmers watched as military transports lifted off from the planetary defense bases. They knew their sons and daughters were among the crews, responding to the call, but they also knew why the response was necessary. In the outer colonies, families gathered around communication consoles to listen for news. They knew that somewhere in the galaxy, a human had been attacked. They knew their military was responding, and they felt the pride and determination that came from belonging to a species that never abandoned its own. Back at Nexus Station, Ambassador Wu Jin was walking slowly through the corridors toward the docking bay. His diplomatic escort seemed nervous about the blood on his face and his calm demeanor. Guide Meltara kept glancing at him with obvious concern. "Ambassador, perhaps you should seek medical attention," Meltara suggested. "The wounds are not serious," Wu Jin replied pleasantly. "My ship has adequate medical facilities." What he did not mention was that the blood served a purpose beyond simple evidence of assault. Every drop contained his complete genetic signature. When human forensic teams eventually analyzed the evidence, they would have absolute proof of what had happened and who was responsible. They reached the docking bay where the human ship Harmony waited. Captain Yeon-ho was standing at the airlock with 3 security officers. His expression was carefully neutral, but Wu Jin could see the tension in his posture. "Ambassador," Yeon-ho said formally, "we are ready for immediate departure if you wish." "Not yet, Captain," Wu Jin replied. "We will remain at the station for now." Yeon-ho looked confused but did not argue. They walked through the airlock and onto the ship. Once they were in the secure command center, Yeon-ho finally spoke freely. "Sir, we received your Red Sky transmission. Fleet Command has confirmed receipt and is coordinating a response." "Good," Wu Jin said simply. He moved to a medical station and began cleaning the blood from his face. "What is the scope of the response?" "Unknown, sir. But Lieutenant So-ra has detected massive military mobilization across human space. It appears to be a full-scale activation." Wu Jin nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent. The Galactic Council wanted to test human resolve. Now they will see what that resolve actually means. Sir, what exactly happened in the council chamber? Wu Jin finished cleaning his wounds and turned to face his security chief. Counselor Threshka lost control of its temper and struck me with its claws. The attack was unprovoked and witnessed by 47 members of the Galactic Council. And now? Now we wait. The aliens think they have shown their strength by allowing one of their members to assault a human diplomat. They believe this will frighten us into accepting their demands. Yanho looked skeptical. Will it? Wu Jin smiled, and this time the expression was not diplomatic or polite. It was the kind of smile that wolves might wear when circling prey. Captain, they have just made the worst mistake in galactic history. They attacked a human under diplomatic protection in front of dozens of witnesses. They gave us legal justification for whatever response we choose. What kind of response, sir? The kind that will ensure no alien ever again thinks humans are weak or helpless. Outside the ship, Nexus Station continued its normal operations. Aliens went about their business, unaware that somewhere in human space, the largest military mobilization in galactic history was beginning to take shape. They had no idea that their simple act of aggression had triggered something far beyond their ability to control or understand. The signal was spreading, and humanity was coming. 72 hours had passed since the Red Sky transmission. On Nexus Station, life continued much as normal. Aliens went about their business, attended council sessions, and conducted trade negotiations. Most had heard about the incident with the human diplomat, but few considered it significant. In the Galactic Council chambers, Counselor Threshka and Vextar were meeting with several other influential members. They were discussing how to handle the human response to their ultimatum. The human is still on the station, Vextar observed. If they were truly planning some kind of retaliation, surely their diplomat would have left by now. Threshka's scales showed confident purple patterns. They are probably trying to figure out how to accept our terms without losing face. Primitive species always struggle with the concept of graceful surrender. Counselor Wylon of the Trade Federation looked less certain. I have been monitoring human communication networks. There appears to be increased military activity throughout their space. Routine exercises, Vextar dismissed. Young species often show off their military toys when they feel threatened. It makes them feel more secure. What the aliens did not realize was that their communication monitoring was picking up only a fraction of human activity. Most human military communications were conducted through quantum-encrypted channels that alien technology could not intercept. If they had been able to see the full scope of what was happening, they would have been terrified. Admiral Shin Tae-min stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as his fleet assembled in the empty space between stars. The massive dreadnought was the centerpiece of a formation that included 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and support vessels carrying enough firepower to level a planet. But the first fleet was just the beginning. Admiral, the 7th. Fleet has reached the rally point, reported Captain Jung Min-ho, Tae-min's flag captain. Admiral Cho Mi-young reports her carrier group will arrive within 6 hours. Tae-min nodded as he studied the tactical display. Red dots marked the positions of human fleets converging from across known space. Each dot represented thousands of personnel and weapon systems that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. What about the reserve fleets? Admiral Park Ji-sung's reserves are 12 hours out. The Colonial Defense Forces are mobilizing but will take longer to reach the staging area. And Admiral Subin? She departed Earth this morning with the home fleet, estimated arrival in 18 hours. Taemin had never seen anything like it. In his 40 years of naval service, he had commanded individual fleets in border skirmishes and pirate suppression campaigns. But this was different. This was every major human naval unit converging on a single point in space. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Commander Lee Dae-ho's exploration group. They're requesting permission to join the formation." "Granted," Taemin replied immediately. In the human military, the response to Red Sky Protocol was absolute. Every ship, every crew, every resource was committed to the mission. 3 star systems away, Ambassador Wu Jin was having tea with Guide Meltara in the station's diplomatic quarters. The alien had insisted on checking on his condition after the unfortunate incident in the council chamber. "Your wounds are healing well," Meltara observed. The delicate, blue-skinned alien seemed genuinely concerned about Wu Jin's welfare. "Thank you for your concern," Wu Jin replied politely. "The medical treatment on my ship was quite adequate. I must apologize for Counselor Threshka's behavior. Such outbursts are not typical of council proceedings." Wu Jin sipped his tea thoughtfully. "I understand that emotions can run high during important negotiations." "Yes, but physical violence against a diplomatic representative violates several galactic treaties. I am sure the Council will take appropriate action." "I am sure they will," Wu Jin agreed. But his definition of appropriate action was probably very different from what Meltara had in mind. "Have you heard from your government regarding the territorial proposals?" "Oh, yes," Wu Jin said with that same patient smile. "My government has been very responsive to recent developments." What he did not mention was that Earth's government had declared a state of emergency and authorized unlimited military spending for the first time since the colony wars. Every shipyard in human space was working around the clock to prepare additional vessels for deployment. On the bridge of the Harmony, Captain Yeon Ho was monitoring the communication networks with growing amazement. The scope of humanity's response was far beyond anything he had imagined possible. "Captain," Lieutenant So-Ra reported, "I'm detecting massive fleet movements throughout human space. Conservative estimates suggest over 3,000 military vessels are currently in transit." 3,000? Yeon Ho could hardly believe the number. "That's almost the entire human navy." "Yes, sir. And that's just military vessels. I'm also detecting movement by civilian ships, transport fleets, and colonial defense forces." Yeon Ho studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. This was not just a military response. This was an entire civilization mobilizing for war. "Any word on destination?" "Unknown, sir. The fleet movements are coordinated, but I can't determine their final objective from here." Yeon Ho could make an educated guess about their destination. Somewhere in the galaxy, the largest human fleet in history was converging on a single point, and that point was probably very close to Nexus Station. In the council chambers, a routine session was proceeding normally. Various species were discussing trade disputes and resource allocation. Councillor Vexitar was presenting a proposal for new shipping regulations when an aide approached his seat with an urgent message. Vexitar read the report with growing concern. His multiple eyes focused on the data with obvious alarm. "Councillor, is there a problem?" the council speaker asked. "Perhaps," Vexitar replied slowly. "I am receiving reports of unusual human fleet movements. Large numbers of ships appear to be moving toward this sector." The chamber stirred with interest. Several other council members checked their own intelligence reports. Threshka's scales shifted to a concerned yellow color. "How large are these movements?" "The reports are unclear," Vexitar admitted. Intelligence services are having difficulty tracking human military communications, but the movements appear to be extensive. Counselor Waylon stood up abruptly. I can confirm unusual activity. The Trade Federation monitors all commercial shipping lanes. Human merchant traffic has decreased significantly in the past 72 hours. Decreased? The council speaker asked. Almost eliminated, Waylon clarified. Human civilian ships appear to have abandoned normal trade routes. This was disturbing news. When a species pulled its civilian vessels out of normal operations, it usually meant they were preparing for military action. Perhaps we should contact the human ambassador, suggested Counselor Ralvek of the Science Consortium. Ask for clarification about these fleet movements. Excellent idea, the council speaker agreed. Send a formal request for Ambassador Kang to address the council regarding human military activities. The message was delivered to Wu Jin within an hour. He read it with obvious amusement before composing his reply. The response was brief and polite. Ambassador Kang would be happy to address the council regarding recent developments. He suggests scheduling the session for tomorrow afternoon. When the aliens read his reply, they should have been alarmed by his confidence. A diplomat whose species was supposedly threatened should have been desperate to explain away any military movements. Instead, Wu Jin seemed almost eager to address the council. As night cycle began on Nexus Station, the aliens settled into their quarters, still believing they controlled the situation. They thought the human fleet movements were defensive preparations, or possibly attempts to intimidate them into more favorable negotiations. They had no idea that outside their sensor range, the largest military force in galactic history was taking shape. Thousands of human ships were converging from every corner of known space, carrying crews who had heard that one of their own had been attacked. The gathering storm was almost ready to break, and when it did, the Galactic Council would learn that humans had a very different approach to diplomacy than other species. Some lessons could only be taught through demonstration, and humanity was about to provide a very educational experience for their alien neighbors. The emergency council session was called for the afternoon of the fourth day. Reports of human fleet movements had been coming in throughout the morning, and several council members were demanding answers. The chamber was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Ambassador Wu Jin entered the chamber exactly on time. He wore the same diplomatic robes he had worn all week, now cleaned and pressed. The wounds on his face had healed to faint scars that served as a reminder of what had brought them to this moment. He walked to his seat with the same calm dignity he had shown since arriving at the station. But there was something different about him now, a quiet confidence that seemed to fill the space around him. As he took his seat, Wu Jin noticed that the alien representatives looked more tense than usual. Several were consulting datapads with obvious concern. Others whispered urgently to their aides. The council speaker called the session to order with obvious reluctance. We have convened this emergency session to address reports of unusual human military activity. Ambassador Kang, the council requests clarification regarding large-scale fleet movements in human space. Wu Jin stood slowly and activated his translation system. Around the chamber, dozens of alien eyes focused on him with intense interest. Honored counselors, he began in his usual calm voice. I am happy to clarify recent developments for the council. He paused and looked around the chamber with that same patient smile he had worn all week. But now the smile seemed different somehow, more knowing, more dangerous. 4 days ago, Counselor Threshka struck me in an unprovoked assault during official council proceedings. This action spilled human blood in an act of aggression against a diplomatic representative. Threshka's scales rippled with annoyance. We have already discussed this minor incident. The council will address the matter through appropriate channels. Minor incident? Wu Jin's smile widened slightly. Counselor, I think you misunderstand the significance of what happened. Vextar clicked his blade-like arms impatiently. What significance? You were struck during a heated discussion. Such things happen in emotional debates, not to humans. Wu Jin replied simply. The chamber fell quiet. There was something in his tone that suggested depths the aliens had not recognized before. Perhaps you would explain these fleet movements, the council speaker requested. Our intelligence services report massive mobilization throughout human space. Of course, Wu Jin replied pleasantly. When Counselor Threshka spilled my blood, he triggered something called Red Sky Protocol. This is a human emergency response system. Emergency response to what? Wei Lan asked nervously. To the assault on a human citizen. Vexitar made a dismissive gesture. You speak as if one human matters to your entire species. Surely your government has more important concerns than a minor diplomatic incident. Wu Jin's expression became thoughtful. Counselor, I think this is where you have fundamentally misunderstood human nature. You believe we think like other species. You believe individual humans are expendable resources in service to larger political goals. Are they not? Threshka demanded. No, Wu Jin said quietly. They are not. He walked to the center of the chamber, his movement drawing every eye in the room. When he spoke again, his voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast space. Let me explain something about humanity that you seem to have missed. We are not like other species. We do not calculate the value of individual lives against political advantage. We do not sacrifice our people for convenience or efficiency. The seed aliens listened with growing unease. This was not the apologetic explanation they had expected. When you strike a human, you strike all humans. When you spill human blood, you declare war on our entire species. This is not a political position or a military doctrine. This is simply who we are. Impossible, Vextar protested. No species can maintain such unity across interstellar distances. Political reality requires compromise and practical decisions. Wu Jin's smile became broader, and for the first time, the aliens began to recognize it for what it was. Not diplomatic politeness, not submission or fear. It was the expression of a predator who knew the hunt was almost over. Counselor, you are about to learn that humans operate by different rules than other species. At that moment, alarms began sounding throughout Nexus Station. Emergency lights flashed as automated systems detected massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the system. The council speaker's tentacles flew over emergency communication controls. What is happening? Report! A technician's voice came through the speakers, tight with panic. Multiple fleet signatures detected at system perimeter, massive formations dropping out of hyperspace. On the chamber's main display, sensor data began to appear. Red dots marked the positions of ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. At first, there were dozens of contacts, then hundreds, then thousands. The aliens stared at the display in growing horror. The formations were enormous, far larger than anything they had seen before, and all of them were human. Admiral Shin Tai-min's First Fleet, Wu Jin observed casually, as if commenting on the weather. I believe that large formation to the north is Admiral Cho Mi-young's carrier group, and those ships on the eastern approach would be Admiral Subin's home fleet. More alarms sounded as additional formations appeared. The tactical display was becoming crowded with red indicators showing human vessels. How many ships? The council, speaker demanded. The technician's voice was barely controlled. Current count is over 4,000 vessels and still climbing. They're taking positions throughout the system. 4,000 ships. The aliens looked at each other with expressions of shock and disbelief. Some species had difficulty fielding. 4,000 ships for their entire navy. The humans had brought that many ships to a single system in response to what they had called a minor incident. "This is impossible," Threshka whispered. "No species mobilizes such forces for one individual." "We do," Wu Jin replied calmly, "because that's what it means to be human." Vextar was studying the tactical display with obvious alarm. "These formations, they have us completely surrounded. Every approach to the station is blocked." "Yes," Wu Jin agreed. "I believe the technical term is tactical encirclement. Admiral Taemin is quite skilled at fleet positioning." "What do you want?" the council speaker demanded. Wu Jin walked back to his seat but remained standing. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the panic spreading through the chamber. "The same thing I wanted 4 days ago, honored speaker. Respect for human territorial rights, recognition of our sovereignty, and an apology for the assault on a diplomatic representative." "You brought a massive fleet to demand an apology?" Weilan asked incredulously. "I brought nothing," Wu Jin corrected. "They came on their own. Every ship, every crew, every officer in that fleet chose to respond when they learned that one of their own had been attacked." The implications of this statement settled over the chamber like a cold wind. The aliens were beginning to understand that they faced something unprecedented in galactic history. A species with such unity that an attack on one individual triggered a response from their entire civilization. "This is madness," Vextar protested. "You cannot mobilize entire fleets every time someone is offended." Wu Jin's smile became almost gentle. "Counselor, you still don't understand. This isn't about offense or politics. This is about family." "Family?" "Every human in that fleet knows that if they were attacked, every other human in the galaxy would come to their aid. That knowledge makes us stronger than any individual weapon system or military technology." More ships continued to arrive. The tactical display now showed over 5,000 human vessels in defensive positions around Nexus Station. It was the largest single military force ever assembled in galactic history. "You have made your point," the council speaker said desperately. "Surely this demonstration is sufficient." "Actually," Wu Jin replied pleasantly, "I don't think the demonstration has even begun yet." As if summoned by his words, communication, systems throughout the station activated simultaneously. A new voice filled the chamber, speaking with calm authority. "This is Admiral Kim Subin of the Human Home Fleet. Nexus Station, you are surrounded by the combined naval forces of humanity. We are here in response to the assault on Ambassador Kang Wu-jin." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the sound of frightened breathing from dozens of different species. "We request that the responsible parties present themselves for justice. We also request formal apologies from the Galactic Council for allowing this attack to occur. You have 12 hours to comply." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Wu Jin looked around at the terrified aliens with that same patient smile. "As I said, honored counselors, you have just learned something important about human nature. We take care of our own. Death, it seemed, really did wear a smile. The 12-hour deadline hung over Nexus Station like a sword waiting to fall. Throughout the massive space station, normal activities had ground to a halt. Aliens huddled in their quarters or gathered in small groups to whisper about the human fleet that now surrounded them. In the council chambers, an emergency session had been running for 6 hours without break. Representatives from every major species argued frantically about how to respond to human demands. The tactical display still showed the overwhelming presence of human ships in every corner of the system. Counselor Vextar paced back and forth in front of the main screen. His multiple eyes kept returning to the fleet positions with obvious agitation. This is unprecedented. No species has ever responded to a diplomatic incident with such massive force. Perhaps because no species has ever been stupid enough to assault a human diplomat, muttered Counselor Ralvek of the Science Consortium. Threshka's scales had been cycling through colors of anger and fear for hours. They cannot seriously intend to attack a neutral station over such a minor incident. The political consequences would be enormous. Would they? Asked Waylon nervously. Who would stop them? Look at that fleet. They have more firepower in this system than most species have in their entire navies. The council speaker had been unusually quiet during the debate. Now he activated the communication system to contact his intelligence services. Status report on the human fleet composition. A technician's voice responded immediately. Current count is 5,700 vessels. Analysis indicates representation from every major human colony and military district. This appears to be their entire active fleet plus reserves and colonial forces. 5,700 ships. The number was staggering. Most galactic conflicts involved fleets of hundreds or at most thousands of vessels. The humans had brought a force large enough to conquer entire sectors of space. Have they made any aggressive moves? The speaker asked. Negative. The fleet maintains defensive positions around the station. However, their formation patterns suggest they could launch coordinated attacks on any target in the system within minutes. Ambassador Wu Jin sat quietly in his designated area, watching the alien panic with calm interest. He had been invited to observe the emergency session so the council could better understand human intentions. In reality, they wanted to watch his reactions and gauge how serious the threat really was. His peaceful demeanor was probably the most frightening thing in the chamber. Ambassador, the council speaker said finally, surely your people do not intend actual violence over this incident. The economic and political disruption would affect every species in the galaxy. Wu Jin looked up with that same patient smile. Honored speaker, I think you misunderstand the situation. My people are not here to cause disruption. They are here to ensure that justice is served. Justice, Vexatar demanded. What justice requires 5,700 warships? The kind that ensures no human will ever again be assaulted under diplomatic protection, Wu Jin replied simply. But the response is completely disproportionate, Threshka protested. I struck you once in anger. Surely that does not justify threatening an entire space station. Wu Jin's expression became thoughtful. Counselor, you seem to believe that the significance of an action is measured by its immediate physical impact. You struck me once, therefore the consequences should be minor. Exactly. But you are thinking like an individual. Humans think collectively. When you struck me, you demonstrated contempt for human dignity. You showed that you consider us so weak and unimportant that you could assault our representatives without consequence. The chamber fell quiet as the aliens considered this perspective. Your action was not an assault on Kang Woo-jin, the individual, he continued. It was an assault on humanity itself. It was a declaration that humans can be attacked with impunity. That is why 5,700 ships came to respond. This is insane, Vextar said desperately. No species can operate this way. The costs are enormous. The political complications are impossible. Yet here we are, Woo-jin observed mildly. At that moment, the communication system activated again. Admiral Subin's voice filled the chamber. With calm authority. Nexus Station, this is Admiral Subin. 6 hours remain before our deadline expires. We request an update on your compliance with our demands. The Council speaker hesitated before responding. Admiral, the Galactic Council is considering your requests. We ask for additional time to reach proper conclusions. Negative. 12 hours was sufficient time to resolve a simple matter of justice and diplomatic courtesy. We will not extend the deadline. Admiral, surely you understand that complex political decisions require careful consideration. The Council represents dozens of species with different legal systems and cultural traditions. There was a pause before Subin responded. When she did, her voice carried a note of cold finality. The Council has had thousands of years to develop systems for resolving diplomatic incidents. If those systems are inadequate to address the assault on our ambassador, then perhaps those systems need to be reformed. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in heavy silence. Reformed, Wei-Lan repeated quietly. She's talking about changing the entire galactic political structure. They wouldn't dare, Vextar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Wouldn't they? Ralvek asked. Look at that fleet. They could impose any political structure they wanted on this part of the galaxy. For the first time, the aliens were beginning to grasp the true scope of what they faced. This was not just about an apology or justice for a single incident. The humans were demonstrating that they had the power to reshape galactic civilization if they chose to do so. What exactly do you want? The Council speaker asked Woo-jin directly. The same things I have requested from the beginning, Woo-jin replied patiently. A formal apology from Councillor Threshka for the assault. A formal apology from the Council for allowing the assault to occur. Full reparations for the violation of diplomatic immunity and the resignation of those responsible for creating the hostile environment that led to the incident. Resignation? Threshka's scales flashed angry red. You demand that I resign from the Council? You and anyone else who supported the aggressive policies that created this situation, Woo-jin confirmed. The galaxy needs to understand that assaulting human representatives has consequences. This is outrageous, Vextar shouted. You cannot dictate council membership. Woo-jin's smile never wavered. Counselor, at this moment there are 5,700 human warships surrounding this station. I think you'll find we can dictate quite a lot of things. The brutal truth of his statement settled over the chamber. The aliens were beginning to realize that their political power meant nothing when faced with overwhelming military force. All their centuries of diplomatic tradition and legal precedent were useless against an enemy willing to use raw power to enforce their will. Think about what you're asking, the council speaker pleaded. If we give in to these demands, it sets a precedent that any species with sufficient military force can dictate political decisions to the council. The precedent was set when you allowed Threshka to assault my ambassador, Woo-jin replied. You demonstrated that the Council's authority depends on the willingness of member species to respect it. Threshka showed contempt for that authority. Now you face the consequences. 5 hours, Waylon whispered, checking the countdown display. We have 5 hours to decide. Actually, Wu Jin said pleasantly, you have 5 hours to comply. The decision was made the moment Threshika struck me. Outside the station, the human fleet maintained its positions with mechanical precision. 5,700 ships holding formation around a single space station was a demonstration of discipline and coordination that had never been seen before in galactic history. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Taman watched the countdown with calm satisfaction. His fleet was ready for whatever decision the aliens made, but he suspected the outcome was already determined. The Galactic Council was about to learn that some prices were too high to pay for pride and arrogance, and sometimes the cost of underestimating an opponent was higher than anyone could imagine. The aliens had wanted to test human resolve. They were about to discover that some tests had consequences that lasted forever. With 1 hour remaining before the deadline, the Galactic Council finally reached their decision. The vote was not even close. 43 species voted to comply with human demands. Only 6 voted to resist. The mathematics of survival had overcome political pride. Counselor Threshka stood in the center of the chamber, his scales showing the gray colors of defeat and resignation. Around him, other council members avoided eye contact. Even his strongest supporters had abandoned him when faced with the reality of 5,700 human warships. I, Counselor Threshka of the Dominion, formally apologize to Ambassador Kang Wu Jin for my unprovoked assault, he said, his voice barely audible. I acted in anger and violated sacred diplomatic protocols. I accept full responsibility for my actions. Ambassador Wu Jin stood to receive the apology with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout the crisis. I accept your apology, Counselor Threshka, and I forgive your actions. The simple grace of his response seemed to surprise many of the aliens present. They had expected demands for punishment or humiliation. Instead, they received forgiveness from the very person they had wronged. The council speaker rose next. The Galactic Council formally apologizes for the hostile environment that led to this incident. We accept responsibility for failing to maintain proper diplomatic decorum and for allowing Ambassador Kang to be placed in danger. Thank you, honored speaker, Wu Jin replied with a polite bow. Vextar was among the council members who tendered their resignations. His multiple eyes showed deep shame as he spoke. I resign my position effective immediately. My support for aggressive policies created the conditions that led to this crisis. One by one, the other supporters of the territorial restrictions also resigned. In total, 8 council members stepped down from positions some had held for decades. But the real changes went far beyond individual resignations. The council also agrees to the following reforms, the speaker announced, reading from a prepared statement. First, new protocols for diplomatic protection that will make such incidents impossible in the future. Second, formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty with no restrictions beyond those applying to all council species. Third, immediate reparations of 1 trillion galactic credits to compensate for the violation of diplomatic immunity. 1 trillion credits was an enormous sum, enough to fund the expansion of human space for decades. But more important than the money was what it represented. The Galactic Council was acknowledging that humans could not be threatened or intimidated. These terms are acceptable, Wu Jin said formally. I will recommend that my government accept the Council's proposals. With the crisis formally resolved, attention turned to the massive human fleet still surrounding the station. Many aliens wondered how long the military presence would remain and what demands might come next. Admiral Subin's voice came through the communication system one final time. "Nexus Station, we have received confirmation that our demands have been met. We thank the Galactic Council for their cooperation in resolving this matter." "Admiral," the Council speaker responded, "how long will your fleet remain in this system?" "Our business here is concluded," Subin replied simply. "Fleet units will begin departing immediately." What happened next astonished every alien observer. The massive human fleet, which had taken days to assemble, began to disperse with the same efficiency it had shown in arriving. Ships formed up into their original formations and departed for their home stations. Within 6 hours, the system was empty except for a handful of human vessels providing escort for Ambassador Wu Jin's return journey. 5,700 warships had simply vanished back into the vastness of space, leaving the aliens to wonder if the entire demonstration had been real. The speed of the withdrawal made an important point. The humans had not come to conquer or occupy. They had come to deliver a message. Once that message was received, they had no reason to stay. Ambassador Wu Jin made his final appearance before the Galactic Council 3 days later. He wore the same diplomatic robes he had worn on his first day, but now they carried additional significance. Every alien in the chamber knew that these simple garments belonged to a representative of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Before I depart," Wu Jin said, addressing the assembled council members, "I want to ensure there are no misunderstandings about recent events." The chamber was completely silent. After seeing what humans could accomplish when provoked, no one wanted to risk another misunderstanding. "Humanity seeks peaceful cooperation with all species," he continued. "We came to the stars hoping to find friends and partners. We believe that diversity makes our galaxy stronger and more interesting." Nods of agreement came from around the chamber. However, Wu Jin's voice became slightly firmer. "Humanity also believes in certain fundamental principles. We believe in the dignity of intelligent life. We believe in the importance of keeping promises, and we believe in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." More nods, though some were more hesitant. The fleet that came here was not an invasion force. It was a family responding to an attack on one of their own. Every human in that fleet knew that if they were threatened, every other human in the galaxy would come to their aid. He paused to let this concept sink in. This knowledge gives us strength that goes beyond individual weapons or ships. It means that any attack on a human anywhere becomes a threat to humanity everywhere. It means that we will never abandon our people, no matter how far from home they may be. The aliens listened with new respect and understanding. They were beginning to grasp that humans operated by rules very different from other species. "I hope the events of the past week will serve as a foundation for better relations between humanity and the Galactic Council," Wu Jin concluded. "We proved that we can be dangerous when threatened. Now I hope we can prove that we prefer to be helpful when treated with respect." As he prepared to leave the station, Wu Jin was approached by Guide Meltara, who had escorted him on his first day. "Ambassador?" the blue-skinned alien said quietly. "May I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "During the crisis, you never seemed worried or afraid. You acted as if you knew exactly what would happen. How did you know your people would respond so dramatically?" Wu Jin smiled, and for the first time Meltera understood what that expression really meant. It was not politeness or diplomacy. It was the quiet confidence of someone who knew they were never truly alone. "Because I know my people," he replied simply. "When Threshka struck me, I knew that somewhere in human space a ship captain would change course to come help me. I knew that a mother would send her son to defend someone she had never met. I knew that farmers and miners and teachers would demand that their government take action. But how could you be certain?" "Because that's what I would do if I heard that another human was in danger. And if I would do it, then I know millions of others would do the same." Meltara thought about this as they walked toward the docking bay. "Your species is very different from ours." "Yes," Wu Jin agreed. "Most species develop unity slowly, over centuries of shared experience. They build it through government institutions and legal systems. Humans developed unity quickly, out of necessity. We had to work together or die alone on a hostile world. And that unity extends across the stars. Distance doesn't matter. Government doesn't matter. If you are human, then you are family. And family takes care of family." They reached the airlock where Captain Yan Ho was waiting. The security officer looked relieved to see his ambassador safe and unharmed. "Ready to go home, sir?" Yan Ho asked. "Almost," Wu Jin replied. He turned back to Meltara. "I want you to understand something important. The fleet that came here was impressive, but it was not our greatest strength." "What is your greatest strength, then?" "The fact that every human in that fleet chose to come. No government ordered them. No law required their presence. They came because they heard that one of their own needed help." Wu Jin stepped through the airlock, then paused for one final comment. That choice, multiplied across millions of people, is what makes humanity dangerous to our enemies and valuable to our friends. Remember that, and you will understand why this week's events were inevitable from the moment Threshka raised his hand against me. As the human ship departed Nexus Station, word of the crisis spread throughout the galaxy. The story was told and retold in 100 different languages and 1,000 different ways. But the core message remained the same. Humanity had announced their presence in galactic politics, not through conquest or intimidation, but through an act of collective loyalty that had never been seen before. They had proven that they were not just another species seeking individual advantage, but a civilization built on principles that made them uniquely dangerous to oppose and uniquely valuable as allies. In the months that followed, human colonies received unprecedented numbers of diplomatic requests. Species that had barely acknowledged human existence suddenly wanted trade agreements, defense pacts, and cultural exchanges. The territorial restrictions were never mentioned again. Human expansion continued at its natural pace, guided by necessity and opportunity rather than artificial limitations imposed by others. More importantly, no human diplomat was ever again subjected to physical aid.